Howdy folks, welcome to another edition of the Scannell Agenda. My name is Stephen J. F. Scannell, and today's date is January 6th, 2016. This show is called I Really Do Design Monorails, Part 2. So, I'm going to gab about monorails and where I stand right now. Yesterday I did a show on the New England World's Fair 2034. So that's long-range planning. If we got our act together, we could do it sooner. And it wouldn't have to be anything close to what I have designed. It could be anything. I remember going to the World's Fair when I was a kid, and I just saw a program on that. And you know, after designing the middle bridge, when I got this idea, oh boy, all I could think of was that pavilion over the middle bridge. And that would be an enormous draw for the world to come to New England, to Cape Cod. When I say New England, I think I mean the broader New England area. And I was looking at the map today, so I think if you drew a circle around, the center of the circle would be Hyannis. And then the furthest you could go would be Niagara Falls. And then that would be the circle. That would be how many hundreds of miles? It's quite a big circle. So you'd grab New York in there, and you'd grab Canada in there, and the Maritimes, beautiful, beautiful Canada. My wife and I took a trip up into Maine, and the funny thing is, we did cross the bridge to Canada. I had my passport, but my wife didn't have her passport. But after waiting a couple hours and so forth, they said, Mrs. Scannell can go to Canada. She didn't have her passport, but they wouldn't let me in. So I got to fix that, if possible. That's getting sidetracked here. Okay, monorails. So the monorail for this 2034 New England World's Fair would include George's Bank and the Grand Banks, possibly not the Grand Banks, but at least George's Bank. And it would include a definite maritime theme, the oceans. And I know we can do it. I really do know that we could do it if we really were ambitious. And we weren't too worried about, as I said, breaking a few eggs to make the omelet. There's no way we're going to have excellence in fishery management, as I've mentioned, without, you got to crack a few eggs in this case, because the fishery system that we have now is, it's set up for a few individuals that are in the industry, and they kind of control things, sort of. Maybe we control things, but we don't know that. I don't know. It's kind of a weird situation. But I've been at this thing for many years to propose better fishery management systems and ideas. Now, being that we don't have any codfish, maybe it might be wise for Cape Codders to listen. If you want codfish, you know, it might be wise for you to listen. I think it would be. Now, I think there's a lot of older Cape Cod fishermen who share most of my opinions about things like, let's say, cultivation of the bottom ground and the habitat. Probably a lot of fishermen don't rise to my level of aquaculture understanding simply because they didn't work in a hatchery. But if they had, I think the foundations that I was given as a kid from the old timers, now that would be something congruent with most of the Cape Cod fishermen. And I say that because as opposed to the bigger industrial fleets of New Bedford with the, you know, the heavy tonnage boats and the gear, etc. Cape Cod fishermen were green fishermen before the advent of the you know, the dragging came in many years ago. I think that was in the teens, middle teens, that the dragon really came in. And I've told you those stories about the boats coming in, you know, full, and then they'd turn around and steam back out and dump the catch. All right, so monorails. Now, as far as this proposal, and it is a proposal, I propose that we have a New England World's Fair in 2034 or sooner. If we could swing it sooner, that might be good. But maybe we can't swing it at all. I don't know. We got to get off the dime here and get going on fisheries. Otherwise, nothing makes sense if we're going to present the world, hey, we have no codfish as usual. We haven't had codfish for how long? Having codfish, I mean, how do you define that? Okay. Monorails. Now, my latest bit of effort kind of recentered the whole system on something I call a car pod. Now, as I have mentioned, existing today are technologies that allow the passenger compartment of a vehicle to be separated from the chassis, the frame, the drive, the wheels. So when I say car pod, what I mean is the passenger area on a car, or the car of the future. However, now, I've been troubled with the measurements of this thing. What would the car pods measure out at? So in some of my drawings, I've got different configurations. So I've finally settled on drawing the car pod in at 4 by 8 feet, simply because I need it. It's just a space saver, in other words. The other thing I've come along with is the tracks. They still remain dovetail tracks, but I think I'm going with a 6-foot track and then a space. And then the other track, generally there'd be another track, would be another 6-foot track. So you really have to use your imagination, I think, on this stuff. So, I mean, you could do the same thing with 2 12-foot tracks and then combine them, but you got to realize that scale has to be worked out by a lot of people, and you got to go backwards and forwards and backwards, and then you're going to settle with something that we've all brainstormed on diligently and modeled up these systems and said, look, the dovetail track will work, that's a keeper, or it's not, and we'll do another style of track. All right, and then the double tracks with a certain space, that'll work. So let me just draw out here something with the marker. So we go to camera 3 if you're in there. Thank you. Okay, so this is, let's say this is 6 feet dovetail, and let's have a space of about 8 feet, and this is another 6 foot dovetail. Now, what you're looking at is a cross section of the tripe or track pipe in a dovetail form, and there are so many forms. So if that's 6 foot, then this is, let's say 8 foot, 4 foot by 8 foot, and another 4 foot by 8 foot over here. So that's basically what I'm working with now, is 4 by 8, just to hold the space, because I'm not really sure. And this is 6 foot dovetail track, another 6. So you would have a drive here. Now, separate from the drive will be your passenger area, let's just say, and that is bolted on there. So this is about a 6 foot tall person here. So these are the Ferraris of the monorail world, I think, because you can see the adhesion, basically, of the system. Just look at that, let's say, center of gravity, you know, which everything with race cars or sports cars. So the center of gravity is very low. Now in here, you've got systems for the drive. You've got, and your drive system and your brake system are pretty much synonymous. But here, you'll also have seals for the air, because this will be compressed air. It'll be a compressed air ride up in here. And so that will require a lot of good technology. And but you're going to have to be able to run without the seals too. But when you're floating on air and you're moving along in 120, 180 miles an hour, there's going to be a certain amount of comfort there and a certain amount of enjoyment, especially if you've got the two. Let me draw out this here and erase this. So if you've got a double, it would look more or less like, all right, a wider. So you've got basically probably a little taller. Again, you've got, and then aspects here of this cavern here being compressed air for the air ride. So you'd be using these seals mostly here. All right, so you've got a separate drive, and then you've got your house for the, you know, bolting in here. And this might be two levels, somewhat like this. So you can see this is a land yacht. Land yacht type of a ride, right? So that's what I would really enjoy if I were a tourist coming over from Europe or China or Australia. I'd like to go on this ride for the World's Fair. And I think that's doable. Now underneath here, you may have a series of 3 or 5 pipes. This is something I was working on today, again, as a railroad ties, and then a few pipes coming in here would mate in. They would go in, and that would carry everything. And then this might look like a ladder with pipes strategically placed. Now this here, let's say, would be your continuous And depending on how many carport conduits, again, these 4x8s just hold a space. I'm really trying to work out. I could use some help working out exactly what the dimension should be for this type of thing. But the carriage system, I've worked on several of those, and I've come up with these cross ties, which are 3 or 5 pipes. If it were 5 pipes, it would look something like 1, 2, something like that. And then what you're carrying would probably melt in at about that level there. And these would be crossing at, well, probably every couple hundred feet, carrying this whole thing here. So this is in simplicity, simplest form what I've come up with now. So you may have pipes here which also lend themselves as structural. Now the more open areas you have, this pipe would be open. That's probably going to increase your strength to weight and your carrying capacity of something like this. Not opposed to using steel. I've been designing some with steel. Some with all steel might work out. I don't know how this is going to work out or if it's going to work out at all. But I think this Scannell agenda is a good place to place your bets here on this kind of thing. Like I said before, a number of shows ago, you know, it's not like I'm designing a religion. This is mechanical stuff, so it's no need to get personal or political or emotional. It's just machinery, basically. Now, whether it fits with our society in the future, I think it would, because all this stuff is basically, I look at it as 200-year designs. Now, I wonder if this would show up here. What's this? So these are kind of some of the things that I'm drawing up. Now some of them look like kind of gizmos, but that's all right. This is a double 6-track like I just showed you here, but it's got a more cavernous and let's say taller system. Now these can change over the topography depending on what you need. They don't have to be all just one thing. In other words, bridging systems are going to require that you go to different. So here's a double 12. These are 2 12-foot tracks. And I'm thinking that every time I think, I get obsolete, okay? Now I had something like a 5, 8, 12 gauge for these dovetails. And now I am on something else, you know, but this stuff will hopefully get worked out. So, oh yeah, I was mentioning, depending on your need is, let's say if you need to move a lot of water, well, with a certain lineage of track, what you're going to want to do is expand out on your cavernous water carrying capacity, because let's say instead of having flooding, you'll be saving water. So you'll be saving money on flooding problems, and then on the other hand, you'll be enriching yourself with water too at the same time. And then of course your insurance will be lower. If you had systems to pump water like a madman, these systems can be, I mean, really jacked up, because if you're looking at 8,000 psi of hydraulic power or compressed air power on tap through this medium of compressed air, you're looking at enormous horsepower to pump water. And as well, you can also tank water, floodwaters. You can tank them with a system like this and just start running trains out full of water. Now, I know that's ambitious, but still. That coupled with the fact that you can move water and put it into reservoirs close by, all that can spell enormous success with your water resources and being able to control your water systems. In other words, your Mississippi and other rivers, to have a lot more control. Now think of the expense of a hot molded wooden pipe or wood, fiberglass, steel, high density polyethylene, etc. Think of the expense as money in the bank. If you're collecting a certain number gallonage of water every so often, that water is worth a lot of money, and it's worth more than money because, as I've said before, we must green the earth. So these systems, these water systems are paramount. And also I've said any civilized society is judged on its water and sanitation systems too. Hopefully we can be civilized here and model this stuff up and possibly do it or do something similar. So I work a lot on my clipboard. I did a show on the clipboard thing. This is my clipboard. This is a little, I've been doing more scale work, rough scale work. This is a little ruler. Make sure your campfire is completely out before leaving it. I got that from the firemen. They did a nice presentation, mostly for the kids, at the Cape Cod Mall a while ago. And boy, is that handy to have a little flexible ruler right on your. So some of my stuff here is scale, roughly scale. Now, you've also got to design in the third rail for electric drives too, because I believe in electrification of the rails. I have for many, many years, since I was on the oil drum, and there were people on there far more advanced in thinking than myself that were pushing the electrification of the rail systems. And think of these land yachts not just as a nice ride, but think of that as competitive tourism for the United States of America and Canada. Now that is money. As we know here on Cape Cod, that's big money. So what's this? Cryogenic shape holder for high density polyethylene. So I'm way off beyond my capacity to figure, and but I have it in my mind that we can lay a false tripe line, and that would be basically a material of high density polyethylene, which will be used and staged, if you will, and also would be a trial run. And then we just piece this up and melt it down as we go, and hopefully with a blimp will come along, and well, maybe not with a blimp, just with a walking system, that would work too. And then you perfect the shape, and then you lock in the shape with freezing this material, and then you fiberglass. Perfectly fair. See, things have got to be just perfectly. When I say perfectly fair, I'm talking about, I don't know, fair within tolerances of 1/8 of an inch, perhaps, you know, over a certain number of feet, 300 feet. I mean, very, very advanced measurement systems, laser systems. For that fair, beautiful curves, just you zip along, you won't even spill your tea or coffee. So, you know, configuration of these types of things can also involve hanging down these systems here that hang under, and you get your legs over here, or as I've showed you, you've got your, you know, your carriage system would be pretty simple gang of pipes. So who knows what's going to end up being sensible, but the core being both the materials delivery and that's an adjustment system, a hinge for segmented dovetails. Now, the modelers of today, the hobbyist modelers, would be great to have them on board, wouldn't it? To actually come into a room, let's say the size of the next door building here, same building, but it's a cavernous area. So we could model up Cape Cod with a bunch of basically what I call cardboard models, and then you'd work on you know, actually, when Alfie Sanford built the 50-foot, I think it's 50-foot Magic class Illyrian, or Herreshoff Illyrian, he was modeling with cardboard and with masonite, etc. So you could actually sit in this model of the boat, and that's the way to do it, to actually get as much modeling done as possible. So it's not something I can say I believe in like the fishery systems, but it's coming along. This might be a keeper. It might be good. Pretty good for a weed puller. All right. Well, thanks for watching the Scannell Agenda. Thank you very much.